Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 13 of the PowettPlay podcast. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Kieran Powell. How are you, Kai?
I'm good, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Like I said, like I said previously, we're thawing out. It's still minus temperatures here in Manchester. So, obviously, you're basking in the sun. So, I'm rather jealous of that.
Yeah, I won't say what the temperature is here. I'll
Oh,
just leave it as it's sunny.
no, please don't. Please don't. But obviously, I wanted to sort of dive in straight away in terms of the first test had just finished for today or last night during the night for Australia versus the West Indies. What did you make of the first test?
Um, as a test match, obviously extremely disappointing to finish on the morning of day three.
Yeah,
But for what for what is there, I don't think anyone sort of expected anything different. When you look at the West Indies team, going into the series and into the match, you've heard lots of talk about an inexperienced batting lineup from three to six, 3 to 7. So I don't think anything else was sort of expected. Maybe a score or two from Brathwaite or Shandapal. But outside of that, I don't think much different was expected. And so it was kind of the outcome we preempted
yeah,
from a batting standpoint. But from a bowling standpoint, obviously, Shamar Joseph,
yeah.
5 wickets out and test debut. Faced him last year in first class cricket. Don't remember him creating all this problems. But no, it looks an interesting one because I've looked through his stats actually. He's played 6 first class matches now, including his test debut. And
Yeah,
he's got 3 4 wicket hauls, so he's obviously a wicket taker.
yeah,
Gets people out. And so that's good. That's an interesting find. I think that Alzari probably needs to bowl a bit fuller. It's something that we've been trying to get him to do for a long time now. I
all
think
right,
that
okay.
he bowls a more sort of white ball length.
Right.
Whereas in Test match cricket, you see the guys that get more success are generally guys that pitch the ball up and give it a chance to do something. Obviously, you get hit for a four or two more, but then you have a lot more wicket taking options as opposed to being back in the pitch. So
Yeah,
I think that's a change that we can expect or we would hope to see from a bowling standpoint. But from a batting standpoint, I'm not sure that there's anything different to be expected in the second test match.
yeah. You touched on it there in terms of obviously from three downwards. I think you've got Kurt McKenzie in his second test. A nice half century, and the other lads there. I feel a little bit sorry for them in the fact that they haven't got that experience there in terms of obviously you've got Brathwaite and Shandapal as you mentioned, but even then Shandapal, I think it's only his 10th Test match. It's
Yeah.
not experienced. It's probably the first time he's played a Test match in Australia. Maybe not. Maybe
No, he made his debut in Australia last
yeah,
year.
yeah. So it's tough. So then you bring in these young lads in, they really need that experience and people to pull in from and I think like they have, some of them have shown some real good talent, um, but it's hard. They need that to, that nurturing into the Test match arena, which is what we've spoke about loads of times. Obviously, is the pinnacle of the sport. And I just hope that maybe there's a way of trying to embed maybe some experience into that squad to help, these players along the way.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, it's not great. Any sort of test team going in where I guess your opener with 10 test matches
Yeah,
is one of the most experienced and pressured players. It's not really great because then you look at the middle order, number three, 2 matches, number four, 3 matches, number five, one, number six, one.
yeah,
So I mean, you sort of from number two to number six hasn't played 20 matches between them.
no,
Um,
no,
and so obviously the expectations going into a first class match, a 2 day club match, anything
yeah,
with that little experience, obviously is going to be a daunting proposition. Much less going up against that bowling attack.
100%, yeah.
That Yeah, they've got the most wickets as a quartet ever in the history of cricket to be in one bowling group. And so it's not going to be easy. And obviously, you saw Josh Hazel would get on a run, I guess, in both first and second innings.
Yeah.
And these things were, I guess, sort of expected, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think, at the end of the day, the way that Hazelwood was bowling, especially, and then Cummins in the first innings as well, they could have played 30, 40 test matches each. Sometimes you can't do much with that bowling attack, like you mentioned. It is formidable at the best of times. So it is always going to be a tough ask. I also think it probably has an impact on Craig Brathwaite being the captain and being at the top of the order. Because I remember speaking to yourself when we were talking about the Super 50, and you were saying that, it's probably the first time in a bit where you've had that freedom to really go out there and sort of put the pressure back on the bowlers, and it was a sort of a game plan. But I can imagine that Brathwaite's sort of gameplay is probably sort of to be quite reserved, because he's got to try and anchor the innings at the top of the order, but yet I can imagine it puts quite a lot of limitations on him, really.
Well, he's normally a very reserved person, player to begin with. At the best of times, he's not an aggressive type player. But I think it might, I guess, sort of work in his favor if he tries to be a bit more positive as opposed to taking it on. Because someone may have a day out, but realistically, obviously the numbers are stacked against them.
Yeah.
And so even if he anchors the innings and bats through, what, let's say he'll get what? How much not out will he get with an inexperienced team? You're talking about most guys. You're talking about guys under 5 test matches. And so therefore he probably should look to go and put a stamp on the Australian bowling attack, and if anything, try and put them on the back foot and allow the other guys to come into the game, allow the other batters to bat with a bit more freedom, because the bowlers are under pressure, and trying to get it back into good areas, build pressure, etc. Because he's asserted himself on the bowling attack. So I think, if anything, that's, I guess, the change I'd like to see. Obviously, from him being the senior player on that tour, with how many of the test matches he's played now, and trying to find a way to get, as a collective, the batting unit to have a chance of putting up a better score.
Yeah. And do you think that, with the way that they've obviously picked this squad as such, do you think they've got to ride this out for a good few months now, in terms of, from a test match perspective? I know we spoke about it before, about the volume of test cricket that the West Indies play, but with them picking this experienced lineup, as we mentioned, do you think they have to ride this out regardless for a long, sustained period of time?
Oh, I hope not. The next tour is not going to be any easier. The next tour that West Indies gone is England. So whereas in Australia, it's just a matter of pace and bounce, and obviously the consistency and accuracy of the Australian attack that you have to deal with. In England, the ball's going to be swinging around and doing a lot more, which isn't going to be easy or great for batting. Generally, I mean, they are fixing flatter pitches for baseball, and that in itself brings into effect a whole nother factor in terms of demoralizing a team or a player being in the field for a day. A team racking up 500 runs in a day and declaring within 90 overs, So I guess there'll be lots of different propositions on hand in that tour. But again, it's not going to be any easy. It's international cricket. England are currently out in India, and depending on how that tour goes, obviously they're going to be looking to, I guess, come back hard, or if they do well, to go even harder. So it's either it's going to be hard or harder for them. It's not going to be easier regardless of what happens. So I think Test cricket is not the place to be, I guess, sort of trying or blooding people. I guess you can do that more in limited overs cricket and get away, because the time frame is, as the name gives away, it's limited. Whereas in Test cricket, because it's such a long period of time, 5-day span of time, think about the amount of things you can do from Monday to Friday, and that's just one test match. You would have worked every single day, you'd have done so many other things, and they'd have played one test match. So I think that definitely probably I'm not saying discard these players, obviously, but get some more maybe 2, 3 more senior players in there, and sort of solidify the team a bit more and give yourself a chance to take games deeper and potentially win.
Yeah, definitely. What did you make of the Australian selection for obviously opening the batting with Steve Smith?
I like it. I was getting a bit nervous there, thinking that he would retire because I'm a huge Steve Smith fan.
Yeah.
If Steve Smith's playing cricket and Steve Smith's batting, I'm watching. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter where I'm at in the world. As long as Steve Smith's batting, I'm watching. I think the closest thing that we've had to touching God's hand from since Don Bradman is the way I like to describe it. He's gotten the closest to doing it as a cricketer. And so I think it's a very interesting proposition. Do I think he'll be successful? Yes, because he's been successful at every other thing else that he's done in cricket. He likes to have a challenge. I think he obviously got bored batting at number 4, which he quite clearly stated. He needed a new challenge to refresh him and keep him going in Test cricket, or it might have been the end of him. So
yeah,
I think it's good for him. It's good for the game. Probably it will take away a bit of his consistency, because he is going to be facing that newer ball with 3 slips a gully, all these other things.
Yeah.
But with that in mind, I think that when he does have a day out, it could actually be bigger than in past occasions as well. So it sort of counterbalances itself in that way, because him coming in at the top of the order, whereas he'd come in at the end of the first session, now he gets to bat the entire day. So as opposed to being 80, 70 not out at the end of the first day, he could now be 140, 150. And that's a dangerous proposition for any team with a player the likes of Steve Smith coming back on the start of day 2, 150 not out. You're talking about triple centuries.
Yeah, definitely. I think to touch on what you said there, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head with the boredom aspect. I think that he's quite clearly got a bit bored, a bit stagnated, batting at number 4. He mentioned obviously batting behind Marnus. He's been waiting. He feels like he's waiting around a lot, and I think that it goes to show how good he is. He's someone who goes, you know what, I'm going to test myself again. I'm going to go and open. I want to go and open the batting. I think that's a real credit to him. And obviously, people are turning around and asking, whether it'll work or not. I've got no doubt in my mind that it'll work, because he'll make it work. It's simple as that. He'll put the hours in, practicing. He'll do everything that's he can control, and it's only a matter of time before, like you said, he gets an absolute big one, because the extra time that he'll have at the crease from opening the batting perspective, he'll get a monster soon. There's no doubt.
Yeah, it's a scary proposition for world cricket, because I heard Michael Clark in an interview, watch out Brian Lara 400. I was like, watch out Brian Lara 400. But then, if there's one guy that likes batting enough to go and challenge himself to, I'm a bit bored. Should I try and get 400? Let me try and get 400.
Yeah.
All right, that's my target.
Yeah.
And he gets a good pitch and a good outfield. It could be curtains for Brian Lara's second time by an Australian. So that'd be interesting.
No, definitely. The only thing that I found a little bit from the negative perspective was the impact it possibly had on the likes of Matthew Renshaw, Marcus Harris, and Cameron Bancroft, in the fact that they've, it's been talked about for ages about Warner retiring, and these 3 were sort of earmarked to take over. Doing what they've done in playing the Sheffield Shield. A lot of them have been doing the thing for Australia A. Do you think that does have a negative impact on the 3 that we've mentioned there, and maybe the dynamic of the Australia squad?
Potentially, but that's the nature of not just sport but business on a whole. It's sometimes you think that you're in perfect position for an opportunity that comes up, and then something else happens and sideswipes that opportunity for you at that time. It doesn't help that the best batsman from since Don Bradman, and you think about everyone that's played the game from Sachin Tendulkar to Brian Lara's, Kumar Sangakkara's, decides, I need a new challenge. Stick me up there. All right, there we go. Problem solved. Unfortunately for those guys as well, you sort of look at Steve Smith and Usman Khawaja in terms of their age, they'll
Yeah,
probably both go around the same time.
yeah,
Sort of figuring out maybe the next Ashes at home will
yeah.
be sort of their last tour. Um, and that sort of puts these three guys just out of contention to come in, because then you don't want to be bringing in guys 31, 32, 33
That
that
next
will
phase.
go
Yeah,
again in the next 3, 4 years.
yeah.
So it's been, I guess, a bit unfortunate for them. Definitely unlucky to sort of find themselves in a position where, yeah, David Warner, great Australian opener across formats, retires, and then Steve Smith puts his hand up. I guess people in India may feel the same, with Rohit Sharma becoming an ODI and a Test opener. But look how that's worked out for
Yeah,
India, one of the best openers that the game has seen.
yeah.
And it's just one of those things when you have people of that nature of talent, you have to find a way to, I guess, get them involved, and they'll find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's just the nature of the beast. I don't know. Maybe one of these guys could convert themselves to a middle order batter and say, "Look, I
Well,
want to get into the middle." Then,
well, that's what my thoughts were. Is that Cameron Green's coming at 4. In my opinion, I think it probably is a little bit too high for him. And that's what you're saying about. I think these three have got to look at adapting their position and saying, that's my route into the side now. I want to go and do that. I'll turn myself into, a higher middle order batter and take my opportunity. I just wanted to touch on then. I read a really interesting article a few weeks ago about the retiring aspect of this great Australian side, and how they don't want to make the same mistake that happened when McGrath and all that the previous Langer, Hayden, etc. all retired, and it's going to be quite interesting to see how they go about planning for this, because they don't want to make the same mistake. And you mentioned there about Khawaja, you mentioned there about Steve Smith and the bowlers. It'd be quite interesting to see how they sort of plan it out in terms of trying to break. How do you learn from something like that? Because ultimately, it is down to the player when they turn around and say, enough is enough, or another opportunity arises. So I'll be interested to see how they play that out.
yeah, I think Australia's a different beast generally. Australian selectors are known to tap a play on the shoulder and say, "All right, if you don't make the call, unfortunately, we're going to make it for you." So we recommend at the end of this series you give
Right.
us a wave. Thank you for your time. But it is, and it will be very interesting, because a lot of these players are around the same age, in and around the same age, work together, played
Yeah.
all their lives together. You look at it, the bowling attack. I think Nathan Lyon is probably the oldest, but again, it's probably easier for him to go longer than others, obviously being a spinner.
Yeah.
You've got Stark, Hazelwood, and Cummins, and it's going to be interesting to see how they get, I guess, phase out, or who they phase out first, and start giving opportunities to others, because you got Scott Boland and Lance Morris and all these other guys
Yeah.
waiting. But waiting and being in and around the pot, and waiting and playing are two different things,
Yeah.
because they're not getting experience, they're only getting older.
Yeah.
So it's not as if they come in. It doesn't matter if you come in at 29 with 5 games, you're still 29 with 5 games, as
Yeah.
opposed to potentially giving that to someone that comes along maybe in the next year, 2 years, and they'll be 24, 25, and they've got 10 years of
Yeah.
cricket ahead of them potentially. So it's going to be interesting to see how and when they phase that out, because in the batting now, I think that they can comfortably say, obviously they've got Manus and Travis Head
Okay. Yeah.
to carry that middle order.
Yeah.
Mitch Marsh again is also in his 30s as
Yeah.
well, so he'll probably go in around the same time as the bowling unit, just after Steve Smith and those guys as well.
Yeah.
So I guess you can see why they were so adamant as well to get um, Cam Green back into the team,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
needed
Definitely.
to have some solidity in that batting unit. If you can have at least the middle order steady, I thought that they may have moved up Travis Head to number 4 and let Cam Green slot in at 5, but
I thought that.
it seemed as it was a situation where everyone was comfortable in their positions, and it's just the one spot that became open, and so he just had to start in, and I guess that's where he bats in first class cricket.
Yeah, I think that like moving Travis said, he's in this red hot form that he's been in for a while now as well. And why change something that doesn't necessarily need to be changed? It might come in due course from a strategy perspective or trying to fit somebody in the side. But there's no point. I thought he would have gone to four, but at the end of the day, why change somebody who's firing in another great century as well?
I mean, is there anything better than watching Travis Head and Mitch Marsh back together at the moment?
I know. They're just disruptive. Every bad ball, they just seem to cash into every single bad ball.
And some good ones as well.
Well, yeah, there is that.
It does help that they open the batting together in one-day cricket as well.
Yeah.
They do have that.
So the Under-19 World Cup starts today in South Africa. Think that looks like there's plenty of young talent on show, and hopefully, like, this is going to be the first time that they get the great experience of tournament cricket and the exposure. What do you take on how you sort of perceive how the Under-19 World Cup will sort of be taken really for them young lads?
No, it's an amazing opportunity, great platform. I remember back in 2008 when I played in the Under-19 World Cup in Kuala Lumpur. It was obviously your first taste of, I guess, international tournament play. So you get to test yourself against the best players in the world at your age group. See how you stack up, where you need to improve. Obviously, just understanding how people play the game in different parts of the world as well. Which it's culturally different. And it was just a shock to the system. I mean, I actually did really well in my Under-19 World Cup. I think I was the second highest run scorer in the tournament or something like that.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah, I did do really well. But look, it's just a great experience for these young guys, and I think that it will be even more so now than ever before, like a great launching pad, because I mean every country now has some form of PL, whatever it. So there's lots of opportunities for these guys. Obviously the guys that are stand-up players go straight into, I guess, franchise teams as emerging pathway players, get that sort of exposure. Some guys go straight into international cricket and take off. I mean, you look at Shubman Gill right now and how he's flying in ODI cricket. And he was just in the Under-19 captains, I think, was it 2 editions before this or something like that? And you just look at the list of players now internationally that have come out of the Under-19 World Cup. It's becoming like a very nice roster of players now. It's starting to serve as like a really important pathway gateway, whatever the case is, to professional cricketers on their journey to becoming, if not international cricketers, at least professional cricketers in the sense of globe-trotting on these T20 leagues around the world. I mean, when I think back to the tournament that I played in, you had Virat Kohli, you had Steve Smith. You had Steve Smith, you had Kane Williamson, I think there was Joe Root, you had Josh Hazlewood, Tim Southee, Ravindra Jadeja. So many players that have, I mean, these guys are all obviously now greats of the game and have gone on to serve their countries and international cricket really well. And so, it's an amazing opportunity. South Africa is going to obviously put on a good show for these young kids. I'm really excited about it. I think the West Indies are playing in 30 minutes time or something like that. They start their first against South Africa. They start their first game against South Africa. So that, I mean, again, in itself, for them, is going to be something that they've never experienced. Playing against South Africa in South Africa, a host nation in a World Cup, and the pressures of that. But it's just more so than anything, just, I guess, an opportunity for these young guys to go and test themselves against the best players at their age groups. Because, for example, some of these guys are going to go back into, from the Caribbean standpoint anyway, going to go back into regional 40 cricket starting in a few weeks, and to come out of opportunity like this, there's a lot of learning that can take place and be transferred into your game, into becoming a full professional now, going forward, and how they mold themselves and carry themselves.
Yeah, definitely. With your involvement, did you feel as going into that tournament that it was going to be your launch pad, or was you so focused on that opportunity at that moment, if you know what I mean?
Well, I'll give you an interesting story. I think my sort of launch pad moment happened before that.
Right.
Because this around the time where there was that Stanford T20 stuff happening in the
Yes.
Caribbean.
Yes.
And I played in the first Stanford T20 tournament in 2006 when I was 16. I played for Nevis in that.
Right.
And so I went to the West Indies when I went to the Under 19 World Cup for the West Indies Under 19 team. Whilst I was there, unbeknownst to me, all of this stuff was happening in the background, where Alan Stanford was trying to get me to fly back from Malaysia to play in the Stanford T20 tournament. I'd only found this out years after, like when I was like in my 20s and already playing for West
Right.
Indies.
Okay.
The West Indies board were adamant, no, he's representing West Indies and stuff. And he got in contact with my dad and sort of offered him like a blank check, like you just put in whatever figure. And we want him to come back. We're gonna send a
Wow.
private jet, and bring him back to Antigua to play in Stanford T20. And then it sort of even came to the point where he's like, okay, we're going to fly him back. He plays in Antigua, and then we fly him back to Malaysia so that he continue playing on World Cup and stuff. I was like, the man offered you a blank check. What are you doing? Like, we could have retired if we even started. What have you done? Yeah. But it's so funny. But bless him. Obviously, Clyde Butts, who's just recently passed away, um, he was our manager on that trip, and he went on to become West Indies chairman of selectors, and he was actually very instrumental in keeping me there and keeping my mind away from, because I didn't have any idea. So he guided me
Yeah.
from all that information and allowed me to focus on
Focus on that.
the Under 19 World Cup. Really good. He's always been like a father-like figure to me, and rest his soul. He's passed on now, but he was very instrumental in allowing me to just go along my journey, as I should do, instead of, could have been a T20 franchise, baby. Could have been the first.
You could have been, yeah. But I suppose, like I said, in hindsight, yeah, he's loads of things. But the fact that you had someone who was looking after your future in terms of like making you remain focused is obviously something that you can't put up. It's invaluable, really, having that sort of mentorship to keep you focused and stuff. I'm looking forward to watching the tournament, and I love watching it in the way where you can sort of earmark players who you think are going to turn into greats and stuff, and you see people and you think, wow, he looks in, he's got a great batting technique, or you see a bowler and you think they've got that raw express pace, or that, from a spinning perspective. And so I'm really looking forward to watching how the tournament goes, really. And like I said, I just hope that they have they get that big exposure and that big break, and they go and take that opportunity when it comes, because like you said, a lot of these greats of the game have come from the under 19 platform, and then they've gone back home and done what they've gone and done. So it's going to be a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to keeping an eye on it.
No, 100%. Even from that last under 19 World Cup in the Caribbean, like, you remember names like Dewalt Brevis, who I thought was an absolute world beater in that tournament. And there was Dino Thualalage from Sri Lanka here, who's gone on to play for Sri Lanka as well. Quite disappointed that the tournament got shifted from Sri Lanka at the last minute, because then I would have been able to go and see a few games and see players in person. So, it's always nice to go and see these guys at that age group, because they're so passionate as well. They think as though the world absolutely depends on, like, getting through that stage of the under 19 World Cups and winning, etc.
Yeah.
So the effort that they put out, it's just pure love and passion for a sport at that age as well, which is so great to see.
Yeah, it is lovely. It's lovely. So I recently read an article as well that ahead of the T20 World Cup, they are going to be doing like a drop-in wicket from the Adelaide Oval into the stadium in New York. What do you make of that?
So just before we got on here, I actually read that same article, and it's like I think it's like 10 pitches or something that they're
Yeah,
making. Yeah. So the guy had said that he's just come back from being out in the US. I think now he's transported the pitches to the US. So the pitches are in Florida at the moment now,
yeah,
and they're being grown, rolled, whatever, however the hell these dropping pitches
yeah.
are procured. And so no, that's an interesting
Yeah,
thing
it is.
because he also said, look, they're gonna drive these pitches up to New York. So it's gonna take 2 days to drive them up to New York. And then obviously there was another release early in the week from I guess it was the ICC putting out 3D renderings of what the ground in New York is going to look like,
Yeah,
but also stating that there's going to be no cricket on these pitches before the World Cup, so nobody knows what they're going to play like.
that's what I mean. I couldn't believe that when I read that bit. Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that's mind blowing to me. That's I mean that again, I'm pretty sure that's never happened. Where
No.
there's not been at least one tester match on a pitch before an international game, much less a World Cup. So it's all first, but I guess you sort of have to give and take with it being in New York and them not
Yeah,
having access to a natural cricket ground. I mean, because I think they're converting Eisenhower Park. And what I've seen as well, which is interesting, is that they reusing some of the bits from the Formula One.
yeah.
Is it the Las Vegas race to build the stands and
I
stuff
think,
around as well?
yeah. But like I said, sorry, like you were saying, the 3D render looks amazing at the stadium, and it's really impressive. But I just don't get why they can't use the warm up, have some warm up matches there,
Yeah.
or at least have some form of cricket there, so you can at least test it. Because not only from a cricket pitch perspective, but they've also got to ensure it works to get people in the venue. There's no issues with, from a fire safety perspective or however many health and safety things you've got to do. You need to probably have some form of warm up on the whole situation, not just on the wicket.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because as you've said, all the possibilities that can come about, you also have to remember that this is the venue that will host India Pakistan.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if ever there were a venue that needed to be tested,
Yeah.
be safe, and have a good cricketing wicket, it will be for the entire World Cup. It will be this one because this is going to host the biggest match of the tournament,
Yeah.
and not just even the cricket or the stadium itself, but like you look at the infrastructure around, and it handle, I guess,
Yeah.
that much traffic because I know the stadium is only going to be a 34,000 seater, but there will be more people on the outside of that stadium in New York. You think about New York, such a cultural melting pot, one of the biggest, if not the biggest city in the world, definitely the biggest in terms of media and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the diaspora from Pakistan, from India, from Asia, from the Caribbean, and then just people that have a general cricket interest that
Yeah.
are gonna fly to that area just to be around. Obviously, not being able to be there, but some people just want to see the teams coming in. Some people just want to see the bus going up. Just cite their favorite players that they're not able to get that close to under normal circumstances. So it's going to be an interesting test, not just for the venue, but just the
In
entire.
general.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one thing, like the USA hosting, it's got this amazing opportunity to bring cricket into the USA, which is absolutely great for our sport. I just hope that from an infrastructure perspective, it works and they get it right so that there's not issues that make it into the media. So for instance, India versus Pakistan there, and there's issues with X or there's issues with Y, and then it becomes in the news, because that's not what we want. We want it to be completely positive about how, India versus Pakistan was this amazing sellout occasion and the atmosphere was electric and it was brilliant to see it in New York. And I just hope that everything works from an infrastructure perspective and it comes out in the most positive way and it's not issues in terms of, from like go back to the wicket thing, that they roll these wickets in and next thing you know, it's a it's a 60 all out versus a, you know, a 60 for 8 chasing, for instance. And it's like, oh, you know, let's make this the best, let's give this the best opportunity it can be to be an absolute, you know, big springboard into USA for cricket.
I'm also thinking logistically. I mean, obviously, I know it's not the easiest to get from the Caribbean all the way to the West Coast. Time differences, flights, etc. I mean, from New York and Miami, I think it's like 5 and 6 hours all the way across to LA. Obviously, you still have to get from the Caribbean, etc. But the 2028 Olympics is in LA, so I was wondering if it were an opportunity to sort of try and, you know, work on infrastructure on that side of the country as well, you know, so that people, players, everyone sort of had like a starting point, as opposed to everything happening out east this time, and then in a few years' time everything shifting up west. So interesting dynamics in play. Obviously, definitely, from a cost perspective, it makes more sense to keep everything on the East Coast, but you're just thinking long term and bigger picture here.
No, definitely. And like I said, hopefully they just get it right, but there's no doubt that they will do, and it becomes it's an amazing occasion. So, well, thank you very much for joining me as always, and it's been, you know, brilliant as always to listen to you, and a little less coughing from me today, so it's a lot easier to listen to.
Before we jump off, Jordan, I just want to get your thoughts now on obviously that big India England series coming up. What should we expect?
I'm looking forward to it. I think that you know, off the back of the test series with Australia, the way that England started and the way that they finished, I hope the momentum carries into the first test. It's just obviously going to be really challenging in different conditions, and I think that I'd like to see how England go about the positivity that they, you know, this Bazball aspect, but the positivity side of things against some of the top spinners. And hopefully then I'd be interested to see, and looking forward to seeing Jack Leach back. I think we really missed him in the Ashes series. I think that with him in that side, it could have been completely different, the series, but that's, you know, you pick up injuries and that's life and that's cricket. So I'm looking forward to seeing him back, and maybe, you know, featuring Rayan Ahmed, the young leg spinner. I'm looking forward to seeing how he goes, and hopefully he features really. But again, it's going to be a massive test, but you know, Stokes playing just as a batter, which we know about anyway. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting. I've seen a lot in the press about England's preparation in Abu Dhabi. Some people saying that they're off to Yas Island to play golf. And the preparation hasn't been ideal. I mean, obviously it's worlds away from, obviously, culturally, the food. Time zones aren't really that big of a difference. The surfaces that they'll get in Abu Dhabi to prepare on, as opposed to out in India. And obviously, I mean, as we saw the last time England went out to India and won the first test match, they really revved up those pitches, and the ball started going sideways. So, I mean, it would have probably given them a better chance. I mean, I guess it always does. It at the end of the day, it might not make a difference. It may make just 1% of a difference. It may make 50% of a difference. But to be practicing in the actual conditions that you're going to go and play in, even if just from a peace of mind standpoint, to know that, you know, I've been out here in these conditions, and, you know, I feel prepared. Could go a long way in helping. And I think it's mostly going to be helping the batters on this trip, more so than anything, because it's not going to be pitches where they just hit through the line that they did this summer against Australia on some nice flat English wickets. You know, the balls are going to be turning. Some may keep low, some will pop. How many sweeps can you sweep before a sweep is too much? You know, things like that come into play.
No, and the point there about the about playing in, you know, warming up in India and playing there. This is what Otis mentioned in when we did the podcast with him. You know, he was saying that, you know, get over there, you know, have your warm up matches and stuff, and maybe that will highlight in the preparation. You might see something like that where you know, England might get rolled in the first test, second test you see a bit of progression, etc., etc. Whereas the idea being is that you have these warm-up matches. I know the England Lions, for instance, are playing India A, so I don't really see why England couldn't have been playing there now against India A, or, you know, against whatever 11 that they put out from a preparation perspective. But surely, like, you know, from your perspective as a player, you'd want to be batting in the closest conditions possible to the first Test match.
Yeah, 100%. The more time you can get in those conditions, the better it is. You look at when England last won the Ashes out in Australia, they spent like a month beforehand out in Australia, going around to all the different states and getting used to conditions, you know, building up from 2-day games to 3-day games to 4-day games, and went into that series playing, you know. Obviously it takes away a lot of time, and that's Test cricket. Like, it takes away a lot of time from home with your family and stuff. But that's the nature of the beast if you want to be competitive at that level.
Do you think that would that fall down to Brendan McCullum as head coach and Stokes as captain from a decision perspective of where they go preparation wise, or would that come higher up potentially?
I don't think that they have that much power. I think that they can make suggestions. It would more, I guess, in collaboration with a Rob Key and whoever else the decision in English cricket, how they see best to get the team prepared for a series wherever it is in the world. They could use Abu Dhabi to get preparation for tours of South Africa. You know, I mean, it's just, and it may just work. You know, it may just be their point of preferred destination where they feel as if this is where they can get the best out of the players preparation wise and keep them fresh.
Yeah, well, hopefully, you know, the preparation in Abu Dhabi works and they get what they need to get done, and we see, you know, some real competitive Test cricket, because I think that, you know, India are obviously massive favourites going into, well, I won't say massive favourites, but the favourites going into it. I just hope to see that, you know, progression from the last Test matches against Australia and into this, and we see the likes of Ben Duckett continue scoring runs, and I think Harry Brook, he's going to be quite a testing series for him, and I think that he's played, I know it's different format, but he's played a bit in the IPL and stuff, so he's probably used a bit more conditions and stuff, so I'd like to see a big series from him, really.
Well, I think the conditions in the IPL are completely different to Test cricket. Yeah, like I've played Test matches in India, and it's really tough. Day 3, 4, and 5. And depending on how they want it to go, it could be tough at the start of the game as well. Whereas when you play one day T20 cricket, you get some absolute belters. Hence the scores that you see in India. So you may be familiar with India, but in terms of conditions and seeing Ashwin and Jadeja, I guess, spinning one sideways and bowling the exact same ball that goes straight on, it's something that you just have to, I mean, you've had to grow up there to be used to it, I guess.
No, definitely. Well, it's one that we'll definitely discuss over the next couple of podcasts, no doubt, and we'll see how it goes. And I'm looking forward to your insights and seeing what you make of the series as well.
Yeah, definitely will be an exciting series. Test cricket is always good, especially when we've had such a huge run of limited overs cricket for the past few weeks and months, obviously, with all the T20 leagues starting up now. We've got the Big Bash, Oil T20.
The SA20 as well.
SA20 and Bangladesh starts there as well. So it's always good to see some blokes just grazing around a pasture in whites for hours and hours upon end.
No, definitely. Well, like I said, I thank you very much for today. It's been good as always, and I hope you've all enjoyed listening. So please listen on Spotify, Apple Music, and other platforms. Plus, you know, watch along on YouTube and like and subscribe. So thank you very much.
Cheers, John.
Cheers.